Hello, everyone. Today, I'd like to talk to you about looking at macros in terms of percentage kilocalories versus grams. And this is really important because a lot of people have some issues when it comes to figuring out their macros. They get confused about which measure is appropriate, grams or percentage kilocalories. And we'll see that this is a common issue that becomes apparent when looking at protein intake and trying to assess if it's adequate and if it could be a reason for maybe some fat loss stalls. So as you can see here on the dashboard, I've filled out food for a day, which amounts pretty much exactly to the recommended macros by Nutrita with some minor adjustments. So it's a 69% fat diet, 26% proteins, and 5% net carbs. So we also have this in grams, which nets out to 150 grams of fat. That's what this person consumed today, and I'll show you this person's profile. She consumed 126 grams of protein and 18 grams of net carbs, which is just under her 20-gram limit, which is standard, introduction to keto, basically. So let's go to her profile so you can see what her settings are. So her goal is to lose fat. She's a female and she weighs 70 kilos, which is about 155 pounds. So Nutrita's default recommendation for protein is to go for 1.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. And that's 126 grams of protein for this female, right? This female who weighs 70 kilograms, 155 pounds, and she's at around 27% body fat, right? And she has a target of getting to around 65 kilos. So basically, you can see that if she's looking at it in terms of grams per kilogram, so look at it at gram amounts adjusted to her body weight and especially her lean body mass, because that's one thing Nutrita does, it adjusts it to lean body mass. It's a bit more precise. You can see that if she doesn't hit that level, and she's maybe thinking, I'm gonna eat only 1,300 calories, which is actually the example that came up in one of Rob Wolf's podcasts, where this female was eating 1,300 calories, around 20% protein, but that netted out to 65 grams of protein on average, which is way, way, way less than actually 126, which is the target we have here. And if we go down, we can't even get as low as she was, right? Our settings won't even allow going under 1 gram per kilogram. So if you're at 70 grams of protein per day, you're still only eating 1 gram per kilogram. That's quite low. That's probably not optimal for fat loss in most cases. And, it's a big reason a lot of females stall, either because they're chronically restricting their calories too much, and thus they're applying percentages to that. And the problem is that, as you can see, it can get really low in a caloric deficit. Whilst if like Nutrita, which only allows about 10% caloric deficit, of course, you can go lower or higher, but I mean, the recommendation is not to go below 10% chronically, because you'll, lower your resting metabolic rate and it'll be harder to lose, and it's a vicious cycle. So we don't go that far. Although our good friends at Keto Gains do suggest a 21 caloric deficit. And there's some nuance here, because their program contains resistance training, which can help to keep your metabolic rate up. So their deficit is going to be less problematic in that sense than for someone who's doing 21% caloric deficit without actually resistance training. And their protein intake is higher here. The default is 2.2. Ours is 1.8. And honestly, as you can see, we allow people to go way, way higher, even above 2.4, and we call it all good. So we let people experiment, and we just put it a little lower down because it's a bit more realistic for people. And 1.8 is already way more than most people are used to, especially females who have been taught that, a green salad is the best thing that they can do for themselves, which is unfortunate. So if we go back on the dashboard, you can see here that this diet, I didn't show you the diet. So before we go to the dashboard, if we go to the journal, I just want to give you an example of what hitting those protein targets goals are like in terms of actual food. That could be 3.5 medium tomatoes, 5 medium radishes, 5 slices of cheddar cheese, 4 Angus beef patties, 4 medium whole eggs, 5 pats of butter, 31 grams of tuna. So that's about a third of a can of tuna, and about 25 blueberries. So that's what, 1 or 2 handfuls. So that's the amount of food for a day. And that leads to a relatively ketogenic diet, right? Actually, a very ketogenic diet, with a 9 out of 10 keto score. The macros are 69% fat, 26% protein, about 5% net carbs, and for about 1,900 calories, nearly 2,000 calories. Like I said, this is about 10%, assuming 10% chronic calorie restriction, which you don't, like we say, it's an estimate, it's not a target, it's just there to give you some context and perspective. But of course, the qualitative changes you're going to make with this diet are much more important. So you can look at the micronutrient intake down here. Remember to keep an eye on that. And basically, this is to remind you that when you're looking at percentages for macros, make sure you also have the absolute gram amounts in mind, because this is going to help you make sure that you actually reach the gram goals and you don't stay hyper focused on the percentages, because you're not taking into account how much you're calorie restricting. So make sure you have those absolute amounts in mind. Just go to the profile page and you can see them here and adjust them here accordingly. Okay. So I hope this was useful, and shout out to Keto Gains and Rob Wolf, good friends of ours. And we have slightly different approaches, but just to give you some context on what they do with some resistance training allows probably for a higher caloric deficit to not become too problematic with respect to resting metabolic rate. So lesson of the day, make sure you resistance train and eat enough high quality protein from animal foods. And keep in mind macros percentages versus gram amounts. Okay, have a good day.